Really, the purpose this evening is we're going to give you a very brief outline of what we've been doing since the first of the year. Then we want to hear from you. We want to hear your thoughts on what we're doing, what we're not doing, what you want to see, what you don't want to see. So it's really our chance to hear from you is the purpose for this evening. So let me just start. The selectmen have asked us to come back to a special town meeting in October to present to the town two basic options: a renovation of the existing building or build a new building in its place. So we're going to bring that back to you, and it's going to be your decision. We're not going to make the decision. You're going to make the decision what direction you would like the town to go to. We started working on this, looking at the renovation option first, and for that we went back and researched basically 19 years of studies and reports that were very complete. They were excellent. They came up with excellent recommendations and suggestions, but the town did not take action for whatever reason. We have spent time and we talked to Don Mills. We commissioned the on-site, in-site building consultants, the same ones that did the school, to look at their report. Interestingly enough, their report and the work that Don Mills came out with was very similar. In so doing, we're going to recommend, based on these reports, roughly a $13 million. We didn't hire an architect to look at this. It's basically a $13 million project to remodel the building, which is 40,900 square feet. This would include a new HVAC system for the building, ADA necessary upgrades, some structural changes inside the building envelope to support programs, and an enhanced entrance with a greeting center and community meeting gathering area. That's the concept that we're thinking about. It will also support, like every other community center that we visited, which was roughly 15, basically the same programs. We're no different than any other community with our programs, except those that might have a full middle school, high school gym, or they might have an industrial kitchen, but that's the only difference. For a new building option, we went out and visited and talked to 15 communities, looking at their community buildings. Most towns that are similar in size and demographics to ours have basically done nothing. They work out of their town halls, they might work out of their churches, they may work out of some private buildings, but most of them have really done nothing about a community building. The exception would be Stowe. And the town of Stowe built a 33,000 square foot building, of which a third of it is a fire department. The rest is the community center and storage. The other community that is similar to ours, even though larger, but has an excellent community center and built a while ago, is Weston. Larger towns like Wellesley, Natick, Lexington, Sharon have very active community centers. And when I say community centers, you have recreation and council on aging all under the same roof. We also saw in Wellesley, the Wellesley Tolles Parsons building, which is a COA building, which is 12,400 square feet. We looked at that in terms of space. That building, for example, has 7 activity rooms that are shared activity rooms. It has one of them is a large room connected to an industrial kitchen. They have a very nice entrance when you go in there, a place to check in, and they have, I call it a cafe. It's a place where you can get coffee, you can meet with people. They have a fireplace, a gas fireplace in there. So it's very inviting, plus offices for the COA that is there. So we base our new building looking at an 18,000 square foot new building. And it really is sort of based again on the Wellesley, Weston, and Stowe. We also used what we think is a very conservative number, and I got this out of some of my work that I've done up at Minuteman talking to the construction team, of using $700 per square feet. That's high, but will it be high when we start constructing a building in 3 years? who knows? But we think we can do that for $13,500, which includes demo of that current building. Again, it would house the same programs, basically, that we have now and that are in every other community center. When I think of that, you're talking about dance, aerobic exercise, stretching and balance programs, spin and rowing, billiards, ping pong, some of them have, board games, martial arts, music activities, theater rehearsals, committee meetings, conference rooms, rooms for lunches, parties, lectures, art programs, book clubs. All these community centers have basically the same thing. We have that over there also. To us, the building that is either renovated or constructed needs to be a welcoming place, and it should be a magnet to bring all ages together. We're currently in what we call phase one. Phase one is when we're coming to the voters and saying, we think we have a concept. We haven't gone out and hired an architect because we don't have the money to do that, to do a complete schematic, but we're looking at renovation and new, and here are the costs. We are also showing some other renovation costs that would be $10 million and $5 million. We want to know what your appetite is to spend money for what you think would be an appropriate building. On October 7th, the town is going to present this to you, and you're going to tell us how you want to move. If you decide to go to renovation or new, we go to phase two. In phase two, we will hire a project manager, owner's project manager, an architect, and we'll do schematic drawings of either the renovation or new. And that is a very, at least when I've been involved with it, it's a very involved process dealing with all the various stakeholders. So they are all involved in that process. We will then come back to a subsequent town meeting and ask for design build, and that's where we're going to be asking for the $13 million or whatever the number is. So that's when the decision is made what you're going to spend. The meeting in October is giving us an indication of what you might be willing to spend for the appropriate program. That's really what I have, Bob.
Okay.
You have a few things to say, and then we'll open it up.
I always have things to say, I guess.
I left the second volume at home, so it's only this volume.
That's not the right slide. So Ford covered an awful lot of material in his, he told me, 2-minute intro. So I'm just, yeah, it was more than two. It was a lot. Is there anybody who has any questions about that Ford's? Yes, please.
I mean, one potential scenario is whether or not we demolish, keep as is, or renovate, is sharing our community, our neighboring community's resources.
Excuse me, could you go to the microphone because we are televising this and they can't hear you unless you...
I'm Karen McCoy from Farm Street, and I'm 69 years old. One of the issues is that we can use the neighboring community centers. I'm a member of the Wellesley Community Center. I've gone with a friend to a Medfield Community Center. I mean, these are really pretty open to us, and probably compete, though there's precedence to those town things, but they're undersubscribed to a large degree. That might not be true in 10 years as the demographics change. But it seems to me it might be cheaper for us to have a special rate for to negotiate with these other town centers. And we really looked at that.
So let me just, I have friends that I know who do take advantage of some of the facilities of neighboring towns. And these two particular gentlemen really like to take advantage of the luncheon opportunities at the various and sundry community centers around. There was the issue of sort of using collaborative space, using other people's space as a distributed sort of service model was looked at a while back. The feedback that we had gotten over town is that people in town preferred to have a facility in town to meet their needs. When you get down to this whole question of community center, it really comes down to preferences. And because when I first got involved in the project last fall, one of the things that I did was we had a meeting with Don Mills, who was a longstanding architect for the town. And I asked him point blank, I said, why is this so hard? You know, why has it taken 18 years of effort to sort of still be at ground zero? And then I noticed, you know, Ford mentioned a number of the projects that people haven't engaged in. And it's just, if we, the town, had to pay for the time that people have spent looking at this issue, we would have made a decision a long time ago. You know, and he just said to me, he said, a community center, for whatever reason, it's not viewed as a necessity. It's viewed as a discretion. It's a discretionary spend. And so people have a hard time rationalizing the spend. So a school, you know, gets the money. Protective agencies building generally gets the money. The highway department definitely gets the money. You know, but when you come to this community center idea, it seems to run into a buffer. And so the approach that we wanted to take that Ford mentioned is we really want to give the town the information that they think they need to make a decision about what to do about Caryl. And we really want the town to think about it, and we really want the town to act, because there's no other way to get it done. And, you know, this slide, I mean, the community center, the Caryl building, is in the center of town. One of my takeaways from the 15 communities that we interviewed or visited is that when the town came together and supported a community facility, it really became a vibrant center of activity. It became a really important social space for the town. And so what my business career, what I always looked to models when I was trying to solve a problem, to see what other people had done solving a similar problem, so that I wasn't always reinventing the wheel. So it was really impressive to me, sort of a skeptic, that the kind of intergenerational, multi-generational activities, the extent of programs, and the social opportunities that the community center presented. It was really surprising. And so, you know, there were two things I said. If you were depressed, go stand outside of Chickering when the kids come in the morning. And if you're really depressed, go stand outside Chickering at the end of the day. If you're not energized after that experience, I don't know what else you could, you know, sort of drive you forward. The community center was the same thing. I mean, we saw centers with people of all different ages, you know, kids programs, adult programs, teen programs, social programs. That was appealing. To me, in the heart of town, having a facility like that, that affords people the opportunity to get together and socialize, is the value proposition. And then the question is if people share that view, if they think that's valuable. And I will tell you, as someone who's been in town over 20 years, you know, you go through life cycles. You know, for the largest part of my time in Dover, the social center was the schools. And there was a lot of activity driven around schools, and and it was a life. But either if you're prior to school or post-school age kids, the social activities sort of dribble away. And so creating social opportunities for socialization and community turns out to be a pretty important thing. So I'm probably off script. So what to do about Caryl? The truth of the matter is, the building, from a town point of view, we are going to be on the hook to do the maintenance work that was voted down May of 2018. And so to keep the building open, to supply the space that people are using, it's an active building, but it's a very large building, we're going to have to spend the $4 to $5 million. So that's sort of the going-in price. I don't think the town is going to, my view, the town is not going to vote to tear it down and plant grass. There's just a lot of people in town who use the facility. So that's sort of the base case. Why renovate or build new? I sort of did an analogy from personal experience. I want to downsize. Kids are out of the house is too big. So my options turn out to be sort of two options. There's really three, but I'll talk it through. So the options are find a smaller house in Dover, about 2,500 square feet, and move down in that range, so you downsize from the current house. The problem in Dover about renovating is that happens to be the hot part of the market, with a lot of families wanting to move in at that price point, and drives price up. And generally, it's an older house that needs to be renovated. So when you're thinking about renovating, you have the base cost of the property, and you have the renovation cost, and that adds up to a number. And then the other option is you would think, buy a new build. Well, they're not building 25 to 3,000 square foot houses in Dover, so that's really not an option. The other option is to buy land, right, and build new. And so when you're going through this, at least when I was going, my wife and I were going through this decision-making process, we were talking about, what style house, what size house, what architectural features, how many rooms, and what's our budget. And we wanted, so once we sort of did a little research, came up with those conclusions, sort of had a direction set, it became pretty clear to us that for a certain amount, so given our budget, we had to have this size house in this area in order to make it happen. And I think that we're asking essentially the town to do the same thing. We think that the decision to renovate or to build new turns out as the price points are pretty similar. And then ultimately it will come down to, if you believe in community center and think that the town should have one, then it becomes down to a preference. Should you renovate the older building, and that has pros and cons, or should you tear it down and build a new facility, which has pros and cons? But in any sense, it's just directional. The actual money to spend, either fully renovating or building new, will be made subsequently. But we've stumbled as a town because we haven't started with a direction and a budget that the voters have told us they would support. And so we want to sort of correct that and go down the path that voters would like us to explore, and a budget that they would be willing to support. I think that's it.
Comments, questions, concerns? And if you have them, please come up to the microphone and introduce yourself.
Does anybody have a card? Can you write in the card?
Or they can come up and just...
Good evening.
And Jeff, who are you?
You already know me. My name is Jeff Merrill, and I live at 14 Meadowbrook Road. I have a series of questions, but I'll just start with one. A very basic one. What is it about the current structure that you think needs to be added to? What deficiencies does the structure have? Space, use, whatever?
The biggest issue is the HVAC system.
I understand all
That
that.
has to be done. When you start doing that, you have to do the ADA compliance.
I understand all that, but the last time that was brought up, that was, using your number, about $5 million. You're saying that plus ADA plus $8 million is where the renovation project number comes from. What are you proposing to use for the $8 million? Simple as that.
There's sort of two renovations. Do you want to? Yeah. Go ahead. He starts pacing that.
I hate this speaking stuff. It's really bad. Where's the number come from? So if you go, what we did was we went back and looked at all the work that had been done prior.
Understand.
That work had been updated in 2017. And that number said if you wanted to fully renovate Caryl, now there's a list of so that when we talk about the 5 million, those are critical, right?
I have no problem with that.
Okay, so-
The question is, how do you get to 13?
So the next increment is all of the other work that needs to be done, that needs to be remediated within the building. So it's electrical systems, it's mechanical systems,
Right.
it's a sprinkler system, it's, I don't know, there's a... Well, that's ADA, but
Right.
there's a whole list of other infrastructure repair that needs to be done. That's a big piece of the cost. In addition, when they did in addition, they talked, it includes the renovation of the kitchen. It includes the renovation of the cooking area. All that sort of adds up to a fully renovated infrastructure, a fully renovated buildings infrastructure. So that gets you from roughly 5 to roughly 10. Getting from 10 to 13, what we did was we asked Don and we asked people. Now, a lot of this work is based on older work. And so if you were doing it now, if you were doing it in 2019 or 2020, what other recommendations would you have that haven't been addressed that we would address? And there were, I think, 3 big things. I think one was the library. They wanted to redo work on the library to make it a better facility for the town. There was work on the entranceway. There was no actual entranceway. And so there was a whole idea about changing the entranceway so it would be much more like the other community centers where when you walk into a welcoming sort of reception area. And so that's work. And then the third piece of work just slipped my mind. The third piece of work was there was a concern among the committee members whether or not did we have money to potentially move walls internally to accommodate programs. And the answer was, when I asked the question a couple of times, I got sort of a yes, I got a no one time and I got a yes one time. So the difference in the money represents sort of a contingency amount to do additional internal renovations to repurpose space if that became necessary. And that's how we got the number.
Okay. One other question. When you talk about building new, as I saw the slide, and I may have misinterpreted because I haven't seen it on paper, it talks about a smaller building.
Yes.
From roughly 40,000 square feet to 10?
18.
18, okay. So half the size. How did you decide to say, okay, we can do away with half the building?
So we had, as you know, we needed to sort of come up with a proxy for a new build. And the idea was we would look at other communities, and we divided the analysis into 2 groups. We had like towns, which had, sort of our sort of tax base relying on the property, population size, and basically wealth. So towns, rural character, so towns that looked and felt like Dover. And then we looked at a slew of towns, we call them neighboring towns. Right? It included the Welsleys, et cetera, et cetera. And so we looked at the programs, we looked at the space, we looked at who was successful, we looked at what they did. And as Ford mentioned earlier, there were 3 towns that were close. Right? He mentioned Wellesley was close because the population that that particular facility serves is 6,000 people. Stowe has a population of 6,000 people, and they have 11,000 square foot building, and plus storage, right? So it's in the 11 plus range.
32,000 total, about 11,000 square feet
For the
community
and
center.
that's,
Yeah, I understand your information. My question is, how do their programs compare to ours?
same.
Okay. One last question. You're talking about building new as an option.
Yes.
And the smaller size of the building says you can keep it to roughly the same amount of money, 13 million.
Roughly, yeah.
Okay. A very simple question. We've spent probably the better part of $750,000 to $1 million in the last 4 or 5 years there. You're just going to throw that out the door?
Well, we've spent $2 million over 20 years. So literally, if you amortize the money, it's $100,000 a year over the life of the building.
But we just spent a whole lot of money in the bathrooms. That, the way I understand it, you're just going to put it out in the dumpster.
So there's the economist's answer, which is
What's your answer?
it spends money, and so that money, and it's not like we've gotten zero value out of that, right? The building is going to be, you're going to get about a 4 or 5 year useful life out of that, the $500,000 for the bathrooms. If you go back to the $800,000 in the mid-aughts was voted by town to basically seal the building, and because there were floods every time it rained. So they did work on the roof and they did work on the masonry, and at the time the Board of Selectmen said, folks, we're doing this to preserve your options going forward, because right now we can't decide what to do. So 10 years hence, this current board is saying, we can't kick the, we can't kick the can down the road much further.
Right.
And please help us decide or tell us what you want us to do.
Let me just correct one thing, Jim. It's not really what we want to do. Both work, the renovation and the new. We're asking the town to make the decision what direction they want to go.
I understand all that, but when you take a look at the concept of the money, you said it'll take $5 million to bring the building's heating and cooling systems up to par.
Right.
Now, obviously, there's going to be some extra money related to the ADA. But again, why isn't that deemed to be a valuable enough option to put it on your screens?
Well, actually, if we got to the investment screen, I think it's on there.
Okay, and I haven't gotten to the second slide, so I appreciate that.
You were here when it was up there.
Well,
So, yes. So
that's fine. I appreciate that.
So let me just fill this in. There is a ton of information. The slides that Jeff's talking about, they're at carylproject.info. It's okay. And if you go to that page, you'll see a slew of different things. The primer gives you all the information summarized for what we found as we did the research. It's a good place to go.
carylproject.info.
Can you come to the microphone?
Could you just repeat that?
It's carylproject, one word, .info.
That's the URL entirely.
Well, you www. Yes. And it's a web page, and it has the information. Now, I like this because Jim's the moderator, and he always tells me to sit down. So, if he goes overtime, ring the bell.
Right. So Dave didn't ring the bell.
I know Dave didn't ring.
Jim Rapetti, 14 Old Meadow Road. I think it would be really helpful for town meeting if you all could prepare itemized sheets that showed the options, what would be involved with respect to each option, and your estimate of the cost. Just picking up on Jeff's point, I think that there might be some confusion about what you mean when you talk about a full renovation versus sort of a maintenance type renovation. And I think just in terms of thinking about what we'll be discussing in October, that would be very helpful.
Well, thank you.
And also wanted to say thank you for all your work. I know this is a lot of work. Thank you.
So, we have 27 pages of feedback so far. And there are certain themes that people are trying to pull out. And so part of this process, part of the initial strategy of the program was to present something to the town, listen to what the town had to say, adjust our work, and repeat until we got to something that felt like a consensus. So that's a very important part of the process.
Amy Moot, 10 Glen Street. A couple of questions about the new versus old. What would be the footprint of the new building? If the new building was built, would that potentially make for some more park space or play space outside? And the other would be also sort of ongoing renovation and maintenance costs required for the different building options, because my concern with renovating the old Caryl is the reason that we've all resisted the maintenance upgrades and in town meetings. It seems like every year it comes with another $1 million. Because it's a 50-plus-year-old building, and sort of what's the difference that we're likely to see by putting a new building in place, and also how does that also factor into the ongoing costs for electricity and heating and green footprint?
So I won't answer all the questions. I'll admit,
That's sort of the information.
Okay, Amy. One of the benefits of a smaller footprint is you do, in fact, open up space. I think it's about a 3-acre parcel over there. And so we're thinking, you know, an 18,000 square foot building would free up a significant amount of that.
Multi-story or single-story?
Most of them that we've seen have been 2 stories. And so the footprint shrinks. It does a couple of things. It, from my point of view, and it's in the pros for this approach, it preserves land for future use. So the town is going to continue to evolve and change, and having space, free space, park space in the center of town, at least for the interim, preserves more options for the town as it grows and changes. So I like that. The other aspect of it is every town we went to has said to us we underestimated parking. There is sort of poor parking right now, but you would sort of say save space for future development, future use, et cetera, you would create a better, sort of roadway parking facility. And that was sort of an unintended. We didn't think about that immediately. It sort of came from our research when we're talking to people. And so that's a big plus. And it's listed as a pro. The renovation costs of Caryl, the maintenance costs of Caryl, I renovated a 1934 Tudor house. And I had an original estimate, and I had the reality of it. And we've been told by several people that these are estimates, they're best guesses, best estimates, but we really don't know what's behind the walls. So the more extensive the renovation, the more likely you're going to find other things that need to be fixed. That being said, the on-site, in-site capital needs assessment people who do this for a living, and we use their work at the region and at Caryl, estimated that after the initial $5 million sort of investment, if you will, they had targeted ongoing maintenance in the $1 to $2 million range. Now, some of that ongoing maintenance would be addressed if we did more renovation. So that's sort of the trade-off there. Did I answer all the questions?
Basically, I think when you get to the town meeting cheat sheets, I think you need to address the ongoing costs of the different options.
Yes.
As well as
Yeah,
the
it's
actual, the upfront costs.
we have those are reasonable numbers for renovation. Our experience with Chickering, when we built Chickering, was that the maintenance for the first 10 years of its life were relatively low, and then it ramps up after that. And we're going to have to find sort of parallels to use to fill in that gap. Carol, I think Kathy was first.
And let me just add to one thing that Bob said. Both Dadick, come on up, Kathy, both Dadick and Sharon. Sharon took over an existing building, which actually was, I think, a hotel. And Natick built a new center. Both of them emphasized that they have to limit some of their programs because there's not enough parking. So parking came up several times. Lexington talked about it also, although I would tell you Lexington, I think, has plenty of parking. But
Kathy Well, 29 Main Street.
Kathy, this one's for Ford, right?
Well,
I see John in the back, maybe you can...
Enter there, yeah. And it's a request, actually, that I think somewhere in one of your statements, and it may have been one of our CMAC meetings, that this was going to be primarily about cost and what the town is going to be willing to spend. And I actually would like to request that you include a third option, which is basically what we had offered. You might be calling it just the Band-Aid approach or this keeping the building open. But actually, I have a second request. There was more in the 2018 proposal, which was basic. It would not have obstructed any other renovations that might want to be made. But people might, if they saw these things in comparison, they might be willing. I think a lot of people would like to keep the building because they don't want to get rid of half the square footage that they've come, used to being able to use and have available. And I think that the $4 million, which did actually include electrical upgrades, and I would love to see your chart there reflect it was boilers and temperature control, or heating and temperature control and electrical upgrades, and then there were renovations to common areas, new flooring, ceilings and stairwells and so forth. So it was really more than just a maintenance and infrastructure project. And I would like to see that reflected accurately when you talk about that sort of thing, because it's not just in your other renovation. It was already in there before. And I guess I'm a little sensitive about that since I spent so much time on that particular project.
So Kathy, let me...
Yeah.
The 4.5 million that we're using for came from the on-site insight report. So we wanted to use that, and it verified a lot of what was in the 4.5 to 5 million. So it's very close that way.
Well, ours was 4 million total. So you're going to a between 4 and 5, or 4.5, whatever. Is that the escalation into whenever you think it's going to happen?
It could be. But the work, so the on-site insight guys came in and they looked at all the stuff that they thought needed to be maintained. And so they grouped a whole set of activities, most of the things that we've been talking about in year one. These were critical, these are the things that have to be done, and I highlight the big items.
Right.
And that's where that 4.5 million, that number comes from.
Well, so however you decide to, I actually feel pretty strongly that there should be a third option. And I think we hear so much, just looking at what people have turned down in the past, or how difficult it is for a non-necessary building, even though it houses 2 town departments. I think it's not necessarily a bad idea. So I just put that. You guys can discuss that.
And the third, and your option is run the maintenance thing through.
Yes. I think whatever was similar, get us reliable heat and temperature controls throughout the building, and that, of course, the ADA compliance. Those are the things that were essential. The electrical upgrades were pretty essential too. But,
there's several things.
But I don't know whether people would be more interested than they were at the last town meeting in that if they saw it in comparison. And it's not a Band-Aid. That's not putting a Band-Aid on. That's some pretty major stuff. Okay. And be very clear about what's included in each option. I know other people have said that. I'd just like to
so we have Jim and Amy and Kathy.
I do have one picky question, which is the programmable square footage in your 15,000 square feet or 13, whatever you have a couple of numbers there for the new build. What's the actual programmable space? Like Caryl may be 40,000 square feet, but it's actually 30,000 programmable usable space.
So I'm going to give that one to Ford because he spent half his life doing building projects.
Well, I can't give you a square footage because we haven't done any plans, but what we're saying is it would be 7 activity rooms, of which 1 or 2 would be large rooms. Large rooms, I think of is like the cafeteria over there is a large room. The library is a large room. So there'd be 1 or 2. You need that for all kinds of functions, including rehearsals, lunches, parties, and all that. The others are very similar in size to the rooms over there as I look at other buildings. But they're activity rooms where you would do the various, the martial arts programs, or the dance program, or the spinning and rowing programs. You do those and those, and they're shared. Also, the building would be managed differently than this one is now. We're the only community that leases out space. All the others, one entity controls the building, and they hire people to run a program. For example, Miss Aaron's dance. You can hire her to run your dance program, but that room can be used, when it's not used for her, it can be used for aerobic or whatever. So we haven't worked on the exact layout of the room. That would come until the next stage, but we've got to have enough rooms to meet the needs that are going.
And that, what you're talking about there is also something that can be worked on, whether you build new or do a renovation. Because one of the reasons that that hasn't happened in the current building is because of the state of the building itself. How can you invite people? How can you go out and market the building or pay for a community center director to do your scheduling, marketing, and all those good things if you don't have bathrooms?
I think when I think of the use of a renovated building or a new building, I think the same use can be there. The issue that you have is with that building over there and with the construction of that building, can you have the type of activity rooms that you want? You know, when you build new, you develop your program and the building is built to meet that program. When you renovate, and then you adapt the programs into there, and that's what we're doing over there. That's the two comparisons.
Yeah.
I hope that.
Thank you.
He has to earn his dinner, you know.
Hi, Caryl, 38 Mill Street. Thank you for all the work you've done. The slides are great. There is some information that I'd like to see. Either you probably have this information, but perhaps it can be put on additional slides before we get to October. And in some ways they echo what Amy was saying. The first thing that I think would be really helpful is to see what a 13, 15, 18,000 square foot new building would look like on the site. So not, architectural renderings or drawings, but just some sort of schematic, like a sketch, so that it would help people visualize what a building that is half the size of Caryl would look like. And what's the idea, what could be done with the balance of the space?
So what a building might look like.
What a building might look like. Yeah, no, I think that would be really helpful. I mean, does it go right on the corner? Does it go on the other side of the parcel?
We might not have it located in the exact place that it would be, but we can come close enough so you can see the comparison.
Right.
We envision the 18,000 square foot building would open up opportunities for parking and for other things. And one thing that we haven't heard much about, Bob's going to probably kick me, but some people have said, we want a pool, or we want a full-size gym, like the middle school gym. That may not be part of this process that we're talking about now, but a future generation might want to do it. So if you're building a building, say a new building, 18,000 square feet, later you can think about where you can build it so you can adapt that building to be able to have that later on, if the town wants.
Or have a secondary use on the balance of the parcel.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
that would be really, really helpful, because I think it's hard for people to visualize what a structure half the size of Caryl might look like. A little bit about what Kathy said as well. I think it would be helpful to have a slide about how a building half the size could accommodate the same programming that's in this building. I don't know if you have that. I didn't necessarily see something addressed to that.
Well, I will tell you how it's done.
Oh, I believe it. I mean, yeah.
Because I didn't know.
Okay.
Right? So I was visiting Natick probably almost a year ago. and we had both a tour of the native facility. And during the course of the discussion, she mentioned to the three of us at that time that communities have life cycles. And the life cycle of the community tends to be early morning, you have young kids and moms. Mid-morning to early afternoon, you have older citizens. Late in the afternoon, you have middle school and high school kids and programs for those guys taking on. And then in the evening, you have adults in meetings, rehearsal for plays, et cetera, et cetera. So it's because we live a certain way, you can stack activity in a smaller space, assuming that the space within the facility is adaptable.
Right.
And that's the secret.
Right, and I think it would be good to articulate that both in text, but also if there's any sort of way you could show that, like in a floor, a sample floor plan. Just because some people understand things visually and other people understand things by reading.
Because now, the existing building,
It's all
the rooms are occupied by one group.
Right.
And they're there forever and ever and ever. And they're not used by multiple groups. That's where I get to the point, I don't think we manage the building well. I think we can manage it, we should manage it the way every other community manages it. And every other community does just what Bob's talking about. We're the only ones that I saw that manage it this way. And it's because the school moves out, and we slowly move things in. Then Park and Rec was the Council on Aging. And we didn't adapt to what we were doing. That's a management style.
And then,
Just one thing, Philip. It is also, Kathy's point, we as a town haven't decided what we wanted to do.
Oh, I know.
And so it's been a holding pattern.
Right.
And people have made reasonably good decisions about the holding pattern as to give us time to make a decision.
so the other thing I didn't see in here, and again, it may be in here, I haven't studied every word, but I'm also very focused on sort of the new technologies, new building technologies, tighter buildings, and so I'd like to understand the energy efficiency and the operating costs of a renovated Caryl versus a new building. I think there could be significant annual savings in a new building with, new technologies.
Yeah, I suppose what we could do is talk to Wellesley. It's the most recent building that the COA, the Wells Parsons Center,
Right.
who have done the most about energy efficiency in the building. Now, of course, this changes as we go forward in time.
Gets better.
And it should get better.
Right.
So yes, I think that's a really important.
I think it's really
point.
important.
Yeah.
I mean, I think if we're looking forward as a community, we should be looking forward to facilities that are as
And green,
green
we're a green community.
Yeah,
So
as possible.
the caveat there is if we voted to renovate, then as we replace the HVAC systems, et cetera, in the renovated building, we would also generate efficiencies and savings.
But you're-
And so
you're
I'm not
heating-
sure what the marginal difference.
Right, but you're heating and cooling a
smaller,
40,000 square
right.
foot building
Right.
versus 13, 15, 18,000
Right,
square foot
exactly right.
building. And so I really think that's an important metric for all of us to
Okay.
understand. Thank you.
Wally?
I am Wally Weld at 29 Main Street. A question or comment, on the new building option. So there's been several comments made already about the smaller size of the new building. And I do understand that the smaller footprint will allow for parking, and perhaps the space can be better managed in a smaller footprint. But I think it's a very serious thing to reduce that building by 1/2. Who knows what Dover is going to be like in 5 to 10 to 15 years? What is the population going to be like? What are the services going to be demanded? And what is the municipal office space going to be? Probably more than now, so I think we should be prepared for it. So I think it's a short-sighted to reduce that space So I hope we don't, if we do vote to build new, I'm afraid that we may regret that decision in 5 or 10 years. Thank you.
Wally, I'm going to just, there are two things. One of the pros for renovating Caryl is that you have the space. You retain the space. Right? So that's and for future use for that's right. And so for the new building, you don't retain a built space. You retain open space for further development when the town needs to do something. From my vantage point, I think we address the future needs of the town in different ways, but we do address the future needs of the town.
So if you need one municipal space, you're going to build a new building?
Yeah, on the new, we really settled on a 13,000 square foot building because that meets the needs of a Wellesley. It meets the needs of basically a Natick. Plus they have a gym, but the Natick. It meets the need of a Stowe. Doesn't quite meet the need of a Weston. We bumped it up to 18 because we were asked by the town to consider 5,000 square feet for potential office space. Because this building, the town government might outgrow this and they might need additional space over there. That's why we went to 18. That was the driver for 18. Now, if the town needed it right away and we collectively decided that made sense, that's why we went to 18. If we collectively decide we need to grow our programs, we have the 5,000 square feet to do that. So that was an option, a swing space, and that's why we went from 13 to 18, just for that reason, because we were given just a heads up from the town, we might need 5,000 more square feet. This building needs work too. But that's a different story.
Hi, Rob Andrews, 35 Miller Hill. I think it would be helpful so I've been in town for 7 years, and for 3 of them I did not have children, so I did not go into the Caryl Center really at all, except maybe to use the bathroom. And so I didn't know what really went on there. And so now as I go there with my kids, I see what goes on there and I see some of the other programming. When I talk to other people with younger children or with kids and they don't use the Caryl Center for their programming, they don't understand what actually happens there. So I think it would be really helpful, like, what are like the non-negotiables? Like, we need a space for Parks and Rec to be because there's nowhere else in town for them to go. Or is there someplace else for them to go? Like, if the building was knocked down and we sold the land and let someone build something else there, like a preschool because there's a preschool there, like, or whatever, what would we be losing out on? And so I think it's important for those of us who haven't been in town for 30 years to know what is going on in there. And then what's the reality? Because I do go in there and when programming is happening and it's dead. So what's the reality of what that programming is? And so when you talk about a multi-use space, that sounds better to me because then you're using a dance studio the whole day instead of an hour a day.
You're using space. Yeah.
Right, so I think for those of us that aren't in there the whole day, we don't really understand what is happening there. And then for the municipal office space, I think that's really important for the town to understand like what we need, why we need it. Because if you just say municipal office space, I come in here and the town seems to run great. But I don't know necessarily unless you tell me that like there are 2 people sharing a desk and like are fighting with each other because they don't have enough space. Like you just have to be a little more transparent with what programming is. And then the biggest question I have is about the space with the school. So like, is the new building going to accommodate the school? If it is, are they going to pay for part of the building because they're using this? Like, how does that work with the renters and the leases? And do we even need that? Because I don't really want to build a preschool for people in Medfield if Dover kids aren't using the preschool. And then maybe we should invest in our own public preschool that we're already paying for instead of I don't know. So those are just lots of questions, I think, about the programmatic space. Because then you can answer questions about like, well, I'll spend X amount of dollars for these programs, but I'm not going to spend X amount of dollars for a pretty door. so that someone feels good about going in and using like their space for like 20 minutes or something like that. So anyways, just more transparency would be helpful.
I think you bring a good point. Not everybody knows what goes on in that building because not everybody goes in there. And I think you're right. We have to do a better job talking about the types of activities and programs that do that. And I think that needs to be explained more. I will tell you, one exciting thing that's happened in there that at least appeals to this guy is they have a spin and rowing class, and it goes on. It is fabulous. They do just an incredible job. Now, that's a new program, but for those that do it, and I see the people that are in there, and some aren't Dover, but most of them are. I think about 70% are. It's a fabulous program that's going on. That's new. So there'll be new programs as we go through the years. The other one is pickleball. People are really excited about pickleball in that activity space that has a high ceiling. Like a lot of people like to call it a gym. I think of a gym more for the high school and the middle school house. But pickleball is a big deal. And I can't tell you how many use it, but a lot of people do. But pickleball's new. I didn't know pickleball 2 or 3 years ago. Now it's sort of exploding. What's going to be there in 10 years? There's going to probably be another game that can be done. So we have to think about the future. So we talk about what's going on now, but we try as best as we can to build space that can be for the future. What's going to happen to CDC? That's really beyond what this committee's doing. That's more in his bailiwick. It's more in the group that is running the building. They're going to have to make those decisions. There are some obstacles if we decided to build new or renovate in terms if we bond it. There's some obstacles with that. I have to have a clearer picture of what those are, whether we can do the renters, but we've been given a warning that it might not work out. I don't know. I agree. It's a wonderful program, the CDC. My family's used it. Well, maybe families in here have used it. But the future of it really is not in the hands right now of this committee. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think it just would be helpful to see like how many people from Dover use the different programs that are in there. If Aaron's Dance is really a program for Medfield.
We have that information on our site. It's there.
Yes.
Very well done.
I'm Nancy Roberts, 2 Bridle Path Circle, and I will say on the concept of the CDC, I've not been a fan of that since I became of age to want to use the senior programs there. I was appalled to find out that the decision had been made years ago to put that CDC, which is a program that has mostly people from outside of Dover, in the prime space that would have been perfect for a senior center. The senior center there is substandard, appalling, and embarrassing. It doesn't work at all. And the people who put a private nursery school in there in place of a public facility open to Dover seniors were really misguided. And I personally have a problem with that. And I don't know which of the 2 options would be better for addressing and making sure that at last Dover has a center where people who are a cohort in age, who actually may have lived in Dover for 40 or 50 years or 30 years and have a lot of friends here that they never see because there's nowhere to get together with them, would have a place to go. And there was a real failure when this lease was given to this private entity that only leases part of the property, but that also gets to use the gym and the cafeteria and all kinds of parts of the building and the playground, and they don't rent lease those things. And they're done at a substandard rate, a very low lease rate. I cannot believe it's market value. So, you know, this is an issue that I don't see any discussion of, but I'd sure like to know how the committee is going to address that if we approve A or B or C.
So the CDC is a really long history of the town. Right? goes back beyond my 24 years. It was a part of the continuing education program at the high school. When the high school ran out of space.
When it was started.
Yes.
But then
Well, it was,
that got cut off.
and then it ran out of space at the high school. The high school needed space, and the town relocated that program into Caryl because the Caryl was available. And I think, there's a couple of points here. A lot of the history is history, and what the people did was to make best use of the facility at the time. It was always a holding action, because we had never actually agreed what way to go forward. And so the decisions were made to sort of utilize the building since it was there, since we needed to find a place for park and rec, since we needed a place for indoor programs. COA had been lobbying for their own space for a very long time. It was a relatively easy way to provide space for the COA, and so it was a series of stopgaps. But that's in the past. It's like the money we spent. It's in the past. We can't address what happened in the past. So our whole point is to try to get everyone to think about what the town would, what value the town would derive from a community center in the center of town. We have to drop the past. And I think when we come down to the question of leaseholders in particular, they pay part of the operating costs of the building. The CDC pays a reasonable amount of money. It might be one of the higher tenants in the building. But again, it's in the past. Ford said it, and I'll say it. None of the other community centers that we visited have leaseholders. On the other hand, when you start to talk about a public space like a community center, it's a public building. People from different towns can come in and access the building. You can go to the Wellesley COA Center. My friends go to every luncheon in every senior center or any community center that they have. What's happened to towns where the number of visitors have increased is they give preference to the town people. So there's more nuance here that we need to be considerate about. But now, if we make a decision to move one way or the other, those questions that have been sort of put on hold or in limbo will be re-raised, and we will have to make an affirmative decision about it. But you want to come back to some of these activities in other communities, with the exception of a preschool, are programs that are run through the community center.
Let me just add, this town has done nothing, basically, about that building. We've kept it going, we've done that, but we haven't made the big step. And the big step is to do a good job in renovation or do a good job in new. It's time that we did that. The COA space is not good space. They deserve more. They deserve a lot more. And we can do that in either one of those plans. We just got, and the programs that we have, we can do so much better. The problem is that it costs money. And are we willing to spend $10, $13 million to either renovate or have a new building that will be used, that we can be proud of, that can pull the community together? I think of the town as something, silos, and maybe that's wrong. But people live, by their age group or where their schools. This could be a place where Nancy, you and I could meet and have coffee. We don't have to go to Needham. Or Ruth, we don't have to go over to Medfield. We could meet there. We could see our friends and our neighbors. We could go to other councils and agents building or other buildings outside of town. But that separates us even more. We have a great opportunity now. Because if we don't do renovation, we don't do new, we're going to continue doing exactly what we're doing now. And if you're happy with exactly as we're doing now, then that's what you should vote for. But I think this town deserves better and can do better. That's sort of my pitch.
Just no pitch. By looking at other community centers who have done either option that we're proposing, they have created vibrant community space. That's real. You can go over and you can visit the communities that we have done, and you can see how it works. Sorry.
Hi, George Doherty, 63 Center Street. I was on the original Caryl Reuse Committee 19 years ago.
So the 2002?
That's right. And in fact, some people in this room were on the committee, happy to say. And I never thought I'd be standing in the townhouse 19 years later and we're at the exact same place, which is really frustrating. And it's a credit to your group and your committee that you brought this to a head again, because 19 years ago the building was old and tired, and now it's older and it's exhausting. And every couple of years, as it's been mentioned, we're throwing a little bit of money on it just to band-aid it, keep it going. And I think people are just, as you say, kick the can down the road, afraid to take a stand. But the building has outlived its useful life, in my opinion. And now, the only reason it's our community center is because we just took down the sign and put a new sign on a school. It's a school. It was built as a school, and even to renovate, and I'm not taking a position here, quite frankly, my wife and I are on the fence, but some of the things that are said in this meeting, it seems to me that, you know, to put the same amount of, to renovate, and it's a school, it's a 40,000 square foot school, and all the work your committee did shows that towns 5 times the size of us have community centers that are 10, 12,000 square feet, maybe even less. You know, this could be good in Framingham, where the population is 10 times Dover, 40,000. But I think the more I learn in today's session, it would seem to me that for the same money, to be able to customize and design something to meet the needs of our town, whether it be the Council of Aging or all the youth, it's a great opportunity. And I also think, and this is piggybacking off of Carol's statement, that if I'm coming in this blind and someone, my neighbor tells me to go to the October meeting to talk about or learn about it or vote, if I see a slide like this, you know, I think some people are just going to glaze over. They see monies and just circles. And I do think that it would be worth spending a little money to have not just a box and say where it's going to, the new property is sit, but have an architectural rendering. So we're not committing to it, but something that would be attractive, because, you know, we all know what the school looks like right now. So if we renovate it, it's still going to basically look like, the community center will look like the Caryl School / Community Center that we see today. So we can visualize that and process that. But when we just say, well, there'll be a new structure, how do you make, if it's 1 or 2? Number 2 is just a pipe dream, and it's, you know, you can imagine what it would look like. But I think it would be worthwhile to pay for an architect's rendering. Have you thought about that?
Let me ask you a question, George. Have we thought about it? We've thought about it, and we're sort of hesitant to spend money until we get a direction. But let me ask you a question, because your office is right near where I'm talking about. The Wellesley building, COA building,
right.
Wellesley. To me, the looks of that building from the outside,
beautiful.
The looks inside, if you asked me and I could, as a benevolent dictator, I could do whatever I wanted, I'd replicate that building.
Yeah, it's gorgeous.
Would that be helpful if you showed that building?
Yes.
So if we had a slide that maybe showed that building, maybe showed a picture, maybe showed a picture of Weston's building.
Yeah, it's got a barn-like look to it.
Yeah, maybe show a building like we Stowe. You know, we're talking about the 3 buildings. Probably that would give people an idea of what we could do there.
I think that's a good idea.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
And we also have floor plans like for Wellesley, so we could say this is Wellesley, but this is the kind of thing we could have. Maybe.
Yeah, I would just.
So he's never been a benevolent dictator.
No, just to follow up on that. I mean, I think for really short money, you could get a rendering of a building on that site. I think it's important, like a lot of what you focus on is what other towns are doing. And I think it's really important to show what a Wellesley building would look like in the context of Dover's downtown. And I think there are computer programs that can do that for you, and I think there are probably architects in town who would be willing to spend a couple hours and offer you their pro bono services.
No, I think your point that you made earlier about showing something on site,
Yep.
because we all know what the site looks like, is a really good
It's
suggestion.
really not a fair comparison until you're able to do
You
that.
could take that Wellesley building, a photographer could do it, who knows how to do that.
You could
kind of thing.
Photoshop it onto
And
the
they could
property.
just superimpose that building on that site. That might be a good idea.
Yeah.
So it's, you know, when there's a lot of brick, you know, I don't know if that's, you can debate that offline, but it seems, you know, you might want a brick structure or, I don't know. So I would say
There's a lot of concern about retaining the character of the town center. And so part of the hesitation about doing something is people will say, oh, that's what they want to do.
Right.
And really what we want to do is going to be a result of the next phase of the study. And the towns that have been successful have run build, design, build, whatever that is
Design
called,
build, yeah.
with very, very inclusive processes. Because I think there's a lot of people who care a lot about what, so that's part of the, can we do that or should we do that? Because I don't want to have a modern, the Wall Center is, from the inside, it's a spectacular building. I mean, the use of light, the openness, it's wonderful. I walked in here and go, yeah, this is it, just like Ford. But the outside is a different model.
Which
You
is
know,
why
the
you might
Tudor
want to go
or-
back to just massing and just show what it would look like conceptually on the
Yeah.
site. I mean, play around with it a little
Yep,
bit, but
yep.
I think there are options.
Yep, okay.
Can I make one informational request? I understand the information on the page. However, I'm assuming you're going to borrow every penny that you're going to use in this project, right?
No,
Where are you going to get the funding?
the funding mechanisms are something that we're going to have to take a real long look at. There are different options for funding, you know, and so we haven't gone into funding. The operative assumption was we'd borrow. But there are other ways of raising money to sort of mitigate the cost. That, to me, it's important, but I think if we don't reach a decision, I don't have to worry about the funding. I only have to worry about the funding if we reach a decision.
I don't disagree, but if we talk about a $13 million project, that's the construction cost. To put that in place may cost another $1.5 million. Now, for the sake of just an example, if the town were to borrow all the money for the construction, we would be adding 200% to our long-term debt as it stands today.
That's because our long-term debt is really low. That's sort of, you know, we're gonna exhaust it.
Okay, but what projects are you conceptually saying we can't address because we don't have the long-term debt capacity? I'm not saying that there's an answer for that now, but you would agree with me though, wouldn't you, that adding that as debt would increase our long-term debt to a level that hasn't been in, what, 15 years?
Probably since the schools.
Right. And that's a 40-year project.
This is going to be a 40-year project.
I'm just saying, I think we should have some financial data on there, because we're not spending $13 million.
So what we're doing with the money, as we're giving an approximate budget.
I understand what you're saying. It's the construction budget, but there are additional costs excluding construction. And I'm just saying, if the funding mechanism was going to cost $1.5 million over 20 years, don't you think people should know?
The number that you see up here, the 13 million, includes construction and soft costs and bonding costs. This came from our town accountant, and the number for 13 million is $360 per year for the average taxpayer.
That's construction funding.
That came from our town.
I'm not doubting that source, but that's everything. Okay?
And when you get to the design build, we don't know the real number. But when you get to the design build, it's a not to exceed number. That's what we've done for every building project that we have done in town. I can tell you by experience, we've done it in the region. We were under budget incidentally on that one.
Okay.
We're doing it in Minuteman, and I can tell you we're under budget on that one. So we do the same thing.
That's fine. I'm not making any criticism whatsoever. I'm just saying for information standpoints.
Thanks, Jerry.
You know, reading this, Charlie Law, 121 Walpole Street. Reading this program here that went out, questions. Should we continue to provide community programs and space in the center of our town? And if so, how? Renovate the Caryl or build a new community center? Where is the basic question here of do we need to do anything at all? We've had a system where we've been taking on projects as they come up. We've taken care of the building. It's a perfectly decent building right now for the programs that are in it. And people talk about some great glowing idea of a wonderful community center that golden ideas are going to pop up and wonderful programs will occur sort of out of the ground. And yet, do we have any programs specifically that we can't pursue because of the present building? As far as I know, it takes care of everything we want to do. And when you think about it, some of the most successful programs in Dover that involve the community are outdoors. Or they're in a place like the Legion where you can buy a drink when you do it. That's where community get-togethers occur. And so I think it's important to take a look at this and see what we're really thinking about here. Now, Ford's enthusiastic about this idea of people are going to get together and have a cup of coffee here. Wait a minute. Is our purpose here to compete with the Dover Deli and Dunkin' Donuts? And as far as dance programs and yoga programs, that sounds nice. But there are people in the business of providing yoga programs and dance programs. Is it our job to compete with them? I think there's a legitimate question here. As we've gotten into this, the basic question of should we be doing anything different at all doesn't seem to have even been addressed. The selectmen have appointed this committee and said, gee, should we have this massive renovation or should we do a $13 million building from scratch without even getting into the idea of what do we need to do something at all here? Or can we just continue on as we have, taking projects as they're necessary and handling it? And that seems to have worked pretty well so far. So I don't see any reason why we need to do something radical now. And it's kind of disappointing that there was never any committee appointed to look into this. There was never any study as to whether we really actually need to do something, or whether we can go on pretty much as we are without suffering any adverse consequences. Now, one thing that is you need to remember, and Jeff has mentioned this business about financing, the money's no problem. I mean, people want to lend us money. It's cheap now. That's just the beginning, though. Whenever you do a public building, you start filling it up with bureaucrats. And Ford has mentioned another 5,000 square feet for administrative costs. Let me tell you, you have an administrative space available, and somehow it's going to get filled. You have bureaucratic expansion, which gets encouraged and developed by building new space for it. You build a space, you get a bureaucratic expansion. And one example is the Council on Aging. When it was downstairs in the fireside room with a little room off the side, it stayed small. It got across the street, and now all of a sudden the budget is up close to $200,000. And this is something that even 10 years ago was less than half that. And yet this is a town where the target population of elderly people of ordinary means is rapidly declining. And when an elderly person living in a house from the 1950s moves out, whether to the above or someplace else, that house gets torn down and replaced by a $2 million house. And that isn't a house that's going to be occupied by somebody who's going to be using Council on Aging programs. So I think you have to understand when you do a big public project, you're not talking just about the building. You're talking about serious bureaucratic expansion.
Charlie, let me try to answer a little bit. We're giving the options up here. You could do new, you could do renovation, or you could just do nothing. You could just do nothing. If we're happy with the building, if we're happy with the programs, if we're happy with the COA space, if we're happy with the recreation space, if we don't care about the building, other than maybe maintaining it, but maybe we don't even do that, that's an option. The town can just say no. And they've done a very good job of that over the last 19 years of just saying no. And, you know, we could do it for another 19 years, and you and I will still be here and talking about it. It's crazy, but that's the option. Do nothing. So the voters in this room in a town meeting vote to do new, they can do renovation, or they can just say no. And that's up to the voters of the town.
I have a comment or observation. Can we go to that slide that shows the aerial view of the center of town?
That's really true. I'll back that up.
It's forward.
No? Yeah.
Up high.
There you go. So please speak into the mic.
Okay. At the risk of being very shallow, we are unusual in our town in that that is our town center. And to me, this discussion is about town pride. And it's about protecting the largest asset that I have in my family, which is my real estate. And when I think about all of the contiguous towns around us and the investments that they have made into the physical assets that the town owns, I think of Natick and the tremendous work that they did in rebuilding the library and the protective services building, et cetera, et cetera. The community center. When I think of Westwood, I think of the community center, the libraries that they've rebuilt. When I think of Medfield, I think of their protective services building. When I think of Wellesley, I think of their new COA. When I think of, and I'm just going through the major intersections going out of Dover. When I think of South Natick, it's not a town building, but I think of a magnificently beautiful independent school that was built at pretty much the crossroads of South Natick. I come through the center of Dover, and if I'm sitting at the Springdale, Walpole, Center Street lights, and lots of people do for a long time in the morning, I am looking at a chain link fence on my left, which sometimes for several months isn't even attached to the poles. And I think as a town, we have 7 properties that we own, some of which are magnificent. We have a town hall that's beautiful, we maintain it. It's something to be proud of. I think of our schools that we rebuilt over the last 20 years, and unfortunately they're not in the center of town, but I think there's something to be proud of. I would like to see this discussion spun in a way that we are investing in our town. We're investing in how we view ourselves. And whether you build or renovate
renovate or whatever, it needs to be something that you're proud of when you drive into the center of our town. And I'll leave it at that.
We hear that. Well,
Again, 29 Main Street. Ford, 2 minutes ago, you said that there were 3 options, build, renovate, and nothing. You didn't listen to Kathy well. She had a third option, which was to do the basic renovation. And we think that, I think, and she thinks, and perhaps somebody else thinks, that that should be an option. Thank you.
We have that out there as an option.
it's on the slide.
Okay, but he didn't list that.
No, I did what I just said, that you're absolutely right, we have it as an option.
Okay.
It is the option. There's actually a couple more, but I don't want to get into it.
So the genesis of what we're doing was because there really is a do-nothing option. At some point in the near future, we're going to have to address the heating system, and it's going to trip the ADA, et cetera, et cetera. So the do-nothing option or the no-cost option costs about $4 to $5 million. And so that prompted the board to say, okay, we've not gotten a yes vote on any of this. If we, as a town, default to the no-cost option and spend $4 or $5 million to renovate the heating infrastructure, et cetera, we will have, by default, chosen Caryl as our future community center. It will be, because now you have $7 million into the building. You've just renovated all the heating systems. It's hard for me to imagine people now voting to do anything else. So this is the inflection point. Now we need to decide, because before that $5 million comes up, we need to choose what we want to do. And, so yes, you can choose continued renovation, and you can have an idea of what that will take over time. Or we wanted to give the town the option to express their opinion, their preference. Should we do this incremental approach and sort of spend money over the next 20 years, or should we step up and either fully renovate or put up a new facility? And that's where how the genesis. So I just wanted to clear that point. Sorry.
So it's coming in a little after 9. I'm sort of thinking that maybe we can call it an evening. Unless you have something, a couple of things to say. We are going to be doing this again on the 10th. So we invite you back again then if you would like to. We would like you to tell your friends to come. This is a great turnout, far better than I thought we'd get. I'd love to see the same kind of a turnout on the 10th if possible. With different people.
So is there 2 people who
You need to put something on the town website. I couldn't even find who's listed.
Nancy, thank you. I agree. Thank you.
Excuse me, it is on the front page. And it does give you the link, it is, and it has been, and it does give you the link. I couldn't find it. It's right at the top. I apologize if it's but
So Felicia, it's at the bottom of the front of the homepage?
It's on the top of the front page.
Now it's on the top.
Thank you, Felicia.
We're going to take two questions and then we're going to go update.
Robert Darian, 12 Haven Terrace. I'm going to bypass some of the other questions I had to bring up tonight, but instead I want to just focus on, you mentioned leaseholders. Is that the correct word, leaseholders? These people hold leases that they have to use the space at Caryl?
Yes.
Well, how are you going to, what mechanism do you have in place that allows you to tear a building down and possibly build a smaller one? What's the mechanism to allow this to be done?
Well,
is there a mechanism in the lease?
Yeah, it's a 1-year lease. Everybody signs a 1-year lease.
So you have a 1-year lease that starts when? And by the way, we have a dance studio, we have a preschool, a private preschool. Anything else that we have in there?
Parent talk.
Martial arts.
Martial. And are these all? Are these private programs, sir? I'm not sure.
Yes.
They are. All right. So these are all people who have leases, And it was mentioned by Nancy Roberts that these are substandard charges against these leases. Is that correct?
I know what the rates are that we charge on a per square foot basis. I don't have comps to know if that's market rate or not.
Okay.
Kathy, you were going to answer a question?
So some of them are below market rate, but I would call it not a lease, but a license agreement. And then the difference between that and a rental lease agreement is that it can be ended at any time for any purpose. So it's not a great deal of safety net for either party.
Thanks, Kathy. Yes? Do you have
Anything else?
anybody else?
If not, thank you for coming. Keep in touch with us. You go to the website, you can send us questions. You can always send an email to me or a phone call. But we appreciate you being here tonight.
Thank you guys for coming out.